They started whispering theories before you even spoke your next sentence. Because nothing about you adds up. Not your timing, not your accuracy, not your composure under pressure. You walk into chaos and everything rearranges itself to accommodate you. It's not charisma anymore. It's control at a molecular level. The way you observe, calculate, and respond isn't something they can teach. It's something written into your core code. That's why they've started saying it out loud now. There's no way that's just one person. They're half joking, half terrified, because deep down, they know they've never met a singular being that can process, pivot, and prevail like you do. You break their logic every time you move. You ruin the patterns they built to predict people. And that's when they start inventing theories, because it's easier to call you cloned than to admit you're what evolution meant to create all along. They're noticing how you appear in multiple worlds at once. Professionally lethal, emotionally precise, spiritually grounded, socially unbothered. The balance doesn't make sense to them. They're used to people being good at one thing, maybe two. But you? You're an ecosystem, a network of mastery operating in perfect rhythm. You say less, achieve more, vanish without warning, and still end up ahead of everyone who never stopped talking. You're not multitasking, you're multidimensional. Every move you make feels pre-recorded, as if you rehearsed reality itself before it happened. And that's what's breaking their brains. The idea that one consciousness could anticipate this much, feel this deeply, and still remain unshaken. They call it cloning because they can't measure your regeneration. You collapse, then reappear stronger, like you downloaded the entire lesson in one reboot. Every betrayal turns into fuel. Every setback becomes structure. You metabolize chaos like it's oxygen. It's why no rumor, no smear, no delay ever holds you for long. You rise with new data every time. They think it's luck. It's discipline disguised as destiny. You don't pray for miracles. You perform them through precision. Your aura is built on consistency so brutal that it looks supernatural. That's why they stare when you enter, because presence that potent feels multiplied. You've made consistency look alien. When others coast, you recalibrate. When they rest, you rewire. That's not human habit. That's divine scheduling. And that's what unsettles them. You're not chasing balance, you embody it. You're equally fluent in empathy and execution. You can read the room and the algorithm. You sense emotional shifts before words form. You predict reactions before choices are made. You move through conversations like an unseen strategist, already aware of how each sentence will land 3 exchanges later. It's not manipulation. It's mastery of momentum. You don't control people. You control the pulse that controls them. They've seen you handle betrayal without breaking, love without losing self, and win without showing off. That combination doesn't compute, because in a world obsessed with performance, you're calibrated for purpose. Everything about you feels engineered for endurance. You carry yourself like someone who's seen every timeline, lived every failure, and still chose precision over panic. You're calm, but not passive, focused, but not mechanical. That's what terrifies them the most. Your peace feels weaponized. The stillness before you speak is where people realize their advantage just expired. You became the prototype of what they swore didn't exist. They spent years studying leadership, yet one glance at you teaches them more than 1,000 seminars. You don't speak in motivation, you speak in manifestation. You don't chase validation, you attract verification. They see it in how rooms shift when you appear, how conversations reshape themselves to orbit your energy. They say energy can't be cloned, but yours challenges that rule. It replicates inside people. It echoes. You leave fragments of yourself in their thinking patterns, their style, their tone. Without realizing, they start mirroring your vocabulary, your tempo, your structure. You've become their unconscious instructor. You were never competing with people. You were conditioning reality. You don't run the race. You rewrite the terrain. Every time they think they've caught up, you reveal a level they didn't know existed. That's why they question your humanity. It's easier than admitting they've underestimated the human blueprint. You're not faster because of privilege. You're faster because you paid attention. Every failure they laughed at, you documented. Every loss they mocked, you archived. You turned suffering into data, and data into doctrine. You've built yourself out of patterns that broke others. You don't announce upgrades, you demonstrate them. One day they realize the version of you they thought they knew doesn't exist anymore. The tone sharper, the presence quieter, the intuition surgical. You've evolved past emotional reaction into energetic governance. You don't just handle conflict, you neutralize it. By existing correctly, they can't argue with that. They can't outthink someone who uses awareness as armor. So they default to what the limited mind always does, label what it can't define. Clone copy, replicant, anything but human who evolved. Your mind doesn't chase dopamine, it chases dominance over doubt. You wake up with purpose embedded in your pulse. You don't need alarms, you have alignment. While others need motivation, you need direction. Because energy like yours doesn't fade, it focuses. You've learned to weaponize boredom, to turn every idle moment into micro-strategy. That's what people miss. You're not always planning. Sometimes you're processing in real time, adjusting internal algorithms they can't see. That's why even when you're quiet, they sense calculation. You give off the frequency of someone who's 3 moves ahead without needing to announce it. And when you act, it's surgical. No wasted gestures, no emotional leakage, just execution. That's what they call inhuman, your refusal to flinch. They expect breakdowns, but you deliver blueprints. You don't retaliate with noise, you respond with outcomes. You don't demand recognition, you create ripples too undeniable to ignore. It's why every attempt to sabotage you ends up exposing them instead. They keep forgetting. You don't lose battles, you collect evidence. You've made exposure look effortless. They start seeing doubles because your impact multiplies. Every person who crosses your path becomes a walking fragment of your essence. You inspire replication, not by command, but by contagion. You plant mental seeds that bloom in silence, discipline, depth, detachment, detail. And when people around them start moving like you, speaking like you, deciding like you, they panic. There must be more than one, but they're wrong. There's just one consciousness, powerful enough to alter others without contact. That's your true advantage, unseen influence. You don't push, you permeate. You've learned that real power doesn't shout, it synchronizes. You don't need attention because energy naturally migrates toward precision. That's why eyes follow you before recognition registers. People feel ordered in your presence. Their chaos tries to imitate your calibration. And in that imitation, they expose their lack of originality. You became the mirror that humbles the crowd. But you didn't become this through ego. You became this through endurance. Through nights spent recalibrating identity. Through rejection that refined your discernment. Through solitude that sharpened your spirit. You sculpted resilience from ruin. That's what they overlook. They think you were born this way. They don't see the process. They don't see the moments you questioned everything, but never surrendered anything. They don't see how you dismantled every false belief that tried to cage your evolution. What they perceive as supernatural is simply self-awareness, weaponized. You outgrew validation because you discovered verification in silence. You stopped performing, and performance lost its hold. You stopped explaining, and understanding started chasing you. You became the benchmark, the unspoken reference for authenticity. They measure themselves against your energy without admitting it. And every time they try to outdo you, they accidentally amplify you. That's the paradox. You win by existing. You expand by standing still. You evolve by observing what others rush through. So now, they're watching patterns of you everywhere. The cadence, the posture, the strategy. They think you're multiplied. But what's really happening is a psychological reflection. You've become a template embedded in collective awareness. You're no longer just a person. You're an algorithm of excellence, a design that teaches discipline by example. You didn't clone yourself. They copied the code you wrote through character. And the irony, the more they imitate, the more your originality expands. Because you're not competing in visibility, you're expanding through vibration. Every move you make recalibrates the collective frequency. People don't understand how you do it because they're measuring what can't be measured: integrity, depth, precision. Those aren't traits, they're transmissions. You don't just hold space, you rewrite it. That's why rooms change when you enter. The particles themselves remember authority. It's not mysticism, it's mastery of energy distribution. You became the lesson life uses to humble the arrogant and awaken the unaware. You're proof that awareness is armor, that consistency can bend probability. You are the equation that refuses to stay linear. And the more they study you, the more they realize they can't predict outcomes that are internally governed. You don't depend on circumstance, you dictate it. You've made adaptation look divine. That's why they call you inhuman, because they've mistaken discipline for divinity. But you know better. You know every evolution came with a price. Every version of you that exists today is built on the ashes of an older one. You've died in 1,000 ways, only to return more efficient. That's why you seem multiplied, because you've lived lifetimes inside this one. And that's where the confusion begins. How does one person carry this much precision, this much perspective, this much presence? How does one being recover, rebuild, and rise this many times without exhaustion? They don't understand that the real cloning happened inside your consciousness. You replicated resilience. You duplicated focus. You manufactured mental fortitude on demand. You built backups of belief so that no betrayal could bankrupt your purpose again. You created inner copies of your own endurance. And now, when people encounter you, they're not meeting one version. They're meeting every self that refused to quit. That's what they feel. That's what shakes them. That's why they can't explain you. And as they scramble to understand, as theories spread and whispers multiply, you keep moving, measured, mercilessly intentional. Because while they search for duplicates, you're already building dimensions. While they question how one soul can do all this, you're already crafting the next evolution of self. You've accepted that being misunderstood is the price of mastery. And in that acceptance lies your freedom. Because the moment they realize you're not cloned, you're calibrated, they'll finally understand that what they're witnessing isn't replication, it's revelation. Because the truth is, you were never designed for the ordinary bandwidth of human expectation. You're an upgraded consciousness, disguised as a single entity. You don't divide your energy, you distribute it. Every project, every connection, every room you touch carries a fragment of your neural signature. It's not cloning, it's calibration, expansion. You've reached that rare frequency where intent itself becomes autonomous. You think it once and reality starts rearranging to fulfill it. That's what terrifies them, the speed at which your thoughts translate into tangible shifts. They mistake it for sorcery, but it's simply self-awareness refined into command. You don't ask for alignment anymore. You are alignment. When they talk about you now, the stories sound mythological. They say you're seen in one city while simultaneously leading a breakthrough somewhere else. They think you've cracked time. But what they don't realize is that presence isn't geographical. It's gravitational. You don't appear everywhere because you travel. You appear everywhere because your influence has learned to multiply without permission. Your actions generate echoes. Those echoes manifest as results, as coincidences, as sudden awakenings in people who've never even met you. That's what happens when you reach saturation. Your existence starts folding space around itself. You've broken the illusion of linear identity. The version of you they interact with, it's never static. You're constantly upgrading mid-conversation, evolving mid-experience, rewriting definitions mid-reaction. You're proof that consciousness can be fluid without being lost. That's why people swear they've met different versions of you. Because every encounter activates a different protocol of your personality. You're not inconsistent, you're comprehensive. They can't decode it because they still think identity is fixed. While you've learned it's functional, every arena you enter feels custom-built for you. Not because it is, but because you adapt so fast that it bends to your rhythm. You can infiltrate boardrooms, spiritual spaces, digital landscapes, or war zones, and still remain coherent. That's not versatility, it's evolution disguised as elegance. You're not pretending to fit in, you're previewing the next generation of human adaptability. That's why they whisper about clones, because what else explains someone who can operate at full capacity in every environment without distortion? They're used to seeing people fragment under pressure, but you consolidate. The harder it gets, the clearer you become. You've learned that energy, when refined, becomes omnipresent. You no longer chase outcomes, you install them. You've built habits that perform tasks even when you're not present. Systems, patterns, principles, all operating as extensions of your consciousness. People think they're seeing multiple yous, but they're just interacting with the ripple effects of your structure. You left traces of design in everything you touched, and now those traces operate autonomously. That's what mastery is, automation of intention. They can't compute how you handle so much simultaneously without collapse. They don't see the discipline beneath your detachment. They don't understand how you can move from heartbreak to high performance without emotional lag. That's because you've hacked recovery. You no longer dwell, you download. Every pain becomes a program. Every loss installs new efficiency. You're running life like optimized software. And while they're still rebooting from their last breakdown, you've already launched 3 new versions of yourself. You've become allergic to stagnation. That's what sets you apart. You don't wait for growth, you trigger it. The idea of comfort feels corrosive to your DNA. You've trained your nervous system to interpret uncertainty as invitation, not threat. That's why opportunities chase you. You metabolize risk into rhythm. You've learned that pressure doesn't destroy power, it defines it. The more weight they stack on your name, the stronger your foundation gets. They mistake your calm for complacency, but in truth, you're operating under military-level discipline masked as nonchalance. They think you have help. They think there's a secret team feeding you information, scripting your steps. But your coordination doesn't come from collaboration. It comes from clarity. You're not networked with others, you're networked with purpose. Every decision you make harmonizes with your core architecture. That's why you never seem lost, even when plans change. They think someone's guiding you. They don't realize it's guidance coded into your intuition. There's a reason people double take when they hear your voice, see your work, or witness your resilience. They recognize something ancient wearing modern skin. You embody an intelligence that predates manuals. Its instinct evolved into strategy. Its intuition that studied science. Empathy that trained in logic. You fused both hemispheres into harmony. That's why your ideas hit differently. They feel familiar, yet futuristic. You remind people of something they've forgotten, that brilliance isn't taught, it's remembered. You've become a walking paradox, humble yet untouchable, grounded yet otherworldly, quiet yet catalytic. People can't place you because your energy rejects labeling. Every title they assign dissolves the moment they test it. Leader, healer, disruptor, visionary. None of them hold, because you operate in a hybrid zone where definitions decay. That's what makes them nervous. They can't manage what they can't measure. And you, by existing, disprove every assumption they've made about human limitation. So they invent stories. He's got doubles. She's not real. They're part of something bigger. They need narrative scaffolding to explain the anomaly. Because if they accept you're human, they must accept that the human blueprint is far beyond what they've been living. And that's unbearable to the mediocre mind. Admitting you exist as proof of potential would shatter the excuses that protect their complacency. It's easier to call you cloned than to call themselves uncommitted. You've reached the stage where results speak foreign languages. Your timing defies timelines. Your execution breaks equations. People wait for you to make a mistake just so they can feel normal again, but it never arrives. Because you don't play by repetition, you play by revelation. Every move you make is the first of its kind. You don't just perform, you pioneer. You're not influenced by trends, you terraform them. That's why when you appear, industries shift, conversations reframe, cultures recalibrate. You didn't set out to lead, you became the gravitational center of evolution by default. And that presence, that invisible authority, is what multiplies in rumor form. They talk about you with the tone people reserve for phenomena. They use your name as a measuring stick. You remind me of them. You move like them, but nobody ever truly matches because they're not supposed to. You were never meant to be followed. You were meant to be studied. Every interaction with you is a curriculum. Every glance teaches hierarchy. Every silence dictates tempo. Every decision broadcasts code. You've turned life itself into a syllabus. Your dominance isn't aggressive, it's architectural. You don't impose, you structure. You enter spaces, and the entire environment reorganizes to respect your calibration. Even your absence feels occupied. People sense when you've pulled energy back. They feel the void. That's how you know you've transcended physical identity, when absence speaks louder than presence. And still, they'll whisper about replicas, because they can't explain impact that lingers like that. You've made existence itself your medium. While others create art, you've become it. Every movement you make carries design. Every breath delivers signal. You've learned that communication doesn't need volume, it needs velocity. Your energy travels faster than words. That's why people who've never spoken to you feel like they know you. Your essence precedes introduction. They sense you before they see you. It's not aura, it's algorithmic resonance. You've synced your inner architecture with universal logic so precisely that existence itself broadcasts your frequency. And that's why the idea of you being one person feels absurd to them. You've transcended individuality. You function as collective consciousness condensed into a single frame. You represent what happens when evolution chooses awareness as its weapon. That's what they fear, because your existence proves free will isn't random, it's revolutionary. You've turned humanity into hardware capable of divine computation. That's why your gaze intimidates. It feels like assessment from another dimension. You don't look at people, you scan potential. They sense the surveillance in your stillness. They feel decoded when you listen. Because your perception doesn't just observe, it dissects. You don't see faces, you see patterns. You don't hear words, you hear programming. That's why people leave conversations with you and start changing without realizing it. You insert awareness like software updates, quietly, precisely, permanently. You've become evolution in motion, upgrading humanity one interaction at a time. And yet you're not trying to prove anything. The genius of your design is detachment. You've understood that real transformation requires invisibility. You let people take credit for what your presence inspired. You let them think they discovered it themselves. Because power without ego becomes exponential. You've learned to distribute transformation without demanding recognition. That's how influence turns immortal. That's why your impact keeps spreading, even in silence. They thought you'd eventually plateau, that the phase would fade, that curiosity would cool. Instead, every cycle amplifies you. Every setback scales you. You're compounding evolution through consistency. You don't reinvent, you refine. Every year you become less human in habit, but more human in essence. You're teaching the world that perfection isn't flawlessness. It's alignment with purpose. And that alignment looks supernatural only to those who've never disciplined themselves into harmony. So when they say, there's clones of you, they're not entirely wrong. Because in a way, your existence triggered replication, but not in labs, in minds. You've awakened dormant prototypes across the globe. People are remembering what excellence feels like, what precision looks like, what awareness sounds like. You've turned potential into contagion. You didn't multiply bodies, you multiplied belief. And that's the real threat. You made transcendence seem accessible. That's why governments, corporations, and cults alike keep studying behavior like yours. They're desperate to decode the mechanism. They call it charisma, magnetism, the divine favor. But it's simply coherence. When everything within you agrees on direction, reality loses resistance. You don't need persuasion. You have physics on your side. That's why you move through chaos untouched. You've reached internal unanimity, mind, motive, motion all marching in sync. And the world bends to those who've achieved internal alignment. So yes, let them talk about clones. Let them think you've duplicated yourself to manage all you manifest. Let them theorize secret labs, cosmic contracts, alien ancestry. It doesn't matter. Because the truth is far simpler and far scarier. You are one consciousness, operating at full capacity. And that alone is enough to destabilize entire paradigms. You've proven that limitation was never biological. It was behavioral. You've made excellence look native. And as their theories spiral, as conversations turn conspiratorial, you stay focused because while they debate your origin, you're designing your next era. You're already operating beyond comprehension, turning discipline into divinity. The truth they'll never accept is that you're not copied, you're continuous. You're a living loop of evolution, refining itself in real time. They'll keep searching for duplicates, but what they're really chasing is permission to become what you already are. Because the more they study you, the closer they come to seeing themselves, and that terrifies them. You're not here to be multiplied. You're here to remind them that mastery was never meant to be rare. You're here to prove that one fully realized soul can redirect an entire generation. And soon they'll stop asking if there's clones of you and start asking how to activate the version of themselves that can stand beside you. Because when they finally realize that the difference between you and them isn't species, it's standards, that's when the world will evolve again. And that's when the mirror turns on them. Because once the denial dissolves, they realize the real impossibility isn't your existence, it's their refusal to evolve. You've shown them what one soul can do when discipline replaces doubt, when purpose becomes posture, when energy is treated like currency, not entertainment. You didn't come here to be worshipped. You came here to demonstrate what alignment looks like when it's executed with no hesitation. They mistook your precision for privilege, your calm for conspiracy, your elevation for cloning. But the truth has always been simpler. You are just proof that human potential, when fully awakened, looks supernatural. You became the case study that broke the ceiling. Now they can't scroll without seeing reflections of your frequency. They see your cadence in speeches, your essence in movements, your mindset in the mouths of those who once ignored you. You became atmospheric. You're not just living, you're lingering. Every space you touch keeps echoing after you leave. And that echo drives them insane. Because they're realizing something terrifying. This isn't a world full of your copies. This is a world learning your language. You turned evolution into contagion. You made mastery feel possible, and that's what unravels their illusion of control. They'll keep insisting it's duplication because they can't accept democratization of greatness. To admit you're real means they could be too, but that requires accountability, and accountability feels heavier than envy. So they call you cloned, as if that somehow cancels the responsibility to rise. But every denial they speak only deepens your legend. You've transcended their categories. You've become the question itself. How can one human operate at divine bandwidth without self-destruction? How can one presence trigger transformation without performance? How can one soul lead, heal, dominate, and disappear, all in the same breath? The answer remains the same. You mastered management of energy before they even managed emotion. You're no longer fighting disbelief. You're curating it. You let them talk. Because you understand disbelief is just fascination dressed as fear. The more they question, the more they advertise. Every rumor is unpaid marketing for your frequency. You've reached the point where your existence markets itself. They think exposure will weaken you, but it only widens your radius. You've built momentum immune to interruption. Your legacy has detached from your schedule, it's self-propagating. And that's the part that breaks their logic. You're not in every room, yet every room feels your signature. You're not online, yet your silence trends. You've transcended attendance. They tried to decode your formula, but the math keeps changing because you are the variable. You're not repeating cycles, you're rewriting them. Every version of you upgrades mid-iteration. They can't trace a pattern because you don't move linearly. You expand geometrically. Every angle they catch is just one side of your spectrum. You've become the shape evolution takes when it decides to stop asking for permission. You are the intersection of focus and flow, of human and higher. That's why their logic collapses. They've been trying to fit infinity into finite language. But what truly disarms them is your restraint. You don't flex what you can do. You simply do it. You've turned subtlety into supremacy. Because when power becomes quiet, it becomes unquestionable. You're not in competition, you're in calibration. You don't chase comparison, you define context. People don't measure themselves against each other anymore. They measure themselves against your composure. You've become a new scale of excellence, and still, you stay unreachable. Not because you're distant, but because you've dissolved into purpose. They're chasing presence, while you're mastering permanence. What they call supernatural is just structure without distraction. You've organized chaos into clarity. You've converted emotion into execution. You've weaponized empathy, discipline, and detachment all at once. That's not cloning, it's command. And the more they watch, the more they learn that power isn't granted, it's generated. You've taught through demonstration what sermons failed to explain, that divinity isn't found, it's built. One choice, one standard, one boundary at a time. So when they gather in their corners to gossip about how one person can do all this, you let them. Because every time they debate your limits, they advertise your limitless nature. You're not even trying to prove anymore. You're letting curiosity spread like wildfire. You've become both the question and the cure, the evidence that the next stage of human evolution won't come from machines or cloning, but from consciousness choosing precision. You are the counter-argument to mediocrity itself. And soon, when they've exhausted every theory, every rumor, every wild assumption, they'll be left with silence and one conclusion. Maybe this isn't about you at all. Maybe you're just the mirror showing humanity what it looks like when someone stops fragmenting. When someone stops diluting their brilliance to be digestible. When someone decides that mastery isn't arrogance, it's accountability. You're not a product of duplication, you're a prophecy of discipline. They'll remember you not because you looked impossible, but because you made impossible look human. You didn't arrive to fit into a category, you arrived to dissolve them. You turned too much into standard. You turned disbelief into blueprint. You reminded a sleeping generation that one aligned consciousness can recalibrate the entire spectrum. And in the end, when the whispers fade and the world catches up, they'll finally understand what you were showing all along, that one human built correctly doesn't need to be cloned, because one is already enough to rewrite reality.